Welcome into episode 275 of the Skate Podcast. I'm Brian DeFelice, joined by Bridget Prue and Scott McLaughlin. Bridget and Scott, this homestand hasn't been the best for the Bruins in the win-loss column since the All-Star break, but they fell to the Lightning 3-2 in a shootout. Let's get right into the opening shifts. Bridget, let's start with you.
Yeah, so I mentioned this at the end of last podcast that I thought that the Lightning were a really good team to test the Bruins and see basically what their bounce back could be because they're in the division and because they've been playing well, and that's the kind of team that you're going to have to beat in the playoffs. I mean, you might meet them in the playoffs as soon as the first round or just at some point on your way to the Eastern Conference Final. So they get down. Didn't look like a great start, a great bounce back when they got down 2-0, but then they fought back and were able to tie things up at 2, and then force the overtime, go into the shootout where they eventually didn't score, so they lost. But the effort was much better. And when we talked to Coach after the game, he said, he thought that they played a good game aside from maybe the power play, and we'll get into that as well.
Yeah, that ties into my opening shift, which will focus on just a few of the negatives from that loss. And one, Linus Ullmark gives up a soft first goal. That one doesn't worry me so much because Linus Ullmark's a really good goalie, and occasionally it just happens. Two, as Bridget alluded to, the power play goes 0 for 6, including 0 for 3 in the third period. 2 of those power plays were in the final 10 minutes, golden opportunity to win the game. They weren't able to do it. Power play has been slumping in general for a couple of weeks now. It's 2 for its last 28. So we can definitely get into that. Obviously, that's a little more concerning because that slump is now, getting longer and longer. And then the third thing that stood out is I thought it was a tough game for the third line, which on Tuesday was James Van Riemsdyk, Morgan Geekie, and Anthony Richard. Now, Van Riemsdyk did score a goal on an extra attacker situation during a delayed penalty call when he was out there with the big guns. But that line, when they were together, kind of got caved in, spent a lot of time in their own zone. I thought Geekie had a little bit of a rough game. I don't think that's really where Anthony Richard appreciate his hustle, but he's not an NHL third liner. So I feel like that's just an area that's just we've talked about, but it's just screaming out for an upgrade, an improvement of some kind.
Yeah, and definitely want to talk about that. Curious to circle back to our conversation from last episode, Scott, about how their performance last night against Tampa Bay, if they deserve another game with the rolling out the same personnel. And based on your commentary there, I think I know where you might feel. For me, the big storyline heading into last night, and let's be honest, even after the game, because regular season games come and they go, but the Bruins recognizing Brad Marchand as 1,000th career NHL regular season game, all with the Boston Bruins, as we know. It's crazy that he's already played 1,000 games, but then again, we think back to 2010. Where were we all, and where were the three of us? So it's been quite a duration for him. Entering the league, entering the franchise, starting off in Providence for 2-3 seasons, cracking the Bruins lineup as a fourth liner, and then eventually, not too long after, finding his way into the top 6 and never looking back. Yes, he was a part of a Stanley Cup champion in 2011, a runner-up in 2013, integral in those teams. But I would say, and they mentioned on the broadcast, from the World Cup of Hockey on, he really took on an elite role in this league, and he really took an elevated step in his career. Here we are at 1,000 games, and he still has a lot of gas left in the tank.
Yeah, and he, after the game, and he's talked about this before too, but I know Bergeron mentioned the World Cup of Hockey when he was in the booth with Nesson during the second period, and Marchand, seconded that after the game, that really was a turning point, because he's on this team with, that Canada roster, like any Canadian international best on best roster, is like just a who's who of the best players in the world. And he said he kind of went into it looking around like, wow, like I can't believe I'm on a team with these guys. And he felt like he was there in part, maybe in large part, because he had chemistry with Patrice Bergeron, and he figured they just wanted to, keep some combinations together, guys that had played together. And he said, as that tournament went on and as he practiced with those guys, he sort of started to feel like he actually belonged, and he wasn't just the wing Bergeron's wingman, and that he actually deserved to be there on his own and could play with those guys. So, and for people who might not remember, like he had an awesome tournament. Him, Bergeron, and Crosby were all together on a line, and that line just like took over that tournament. They were dominant. And yeah, his best seasons came after that. We're talking 6-7 years into his career at that point, and that is really when he became an elite player. And then he stayed at that level, for probably about 6 years, basically right up until last year when the double hip surgery, set him back and resulted in a little bit of a down season. And now this year he's bounced right back to, maybe he's not like one of the 2 or 3 best wingers in the NHL, but he's probably back to one of the top 10. He's having a really good season. So, yeah, I mean, a lot to get into there just with his legacy and everything he's accomplished and where he stands in Bruins history, because the 1,000 games is awesome. And he's the 8th one in Bruins history to do it, but it's also the elite level that he's played at. And, he's pushing his way into like top 10 Bruin ever, depending on how much longer he goes. Like you could be talking about top 5. Hell, if he's captain of a Stanley Cup team, like you're probably moving him ahead of Bergeron. Like it's crazy. He's not at the end yet, so there's still higher he can go.
Yeah, and we talked about his international play and him realizing like, oh, he was good enough to play alongside Sidney Crosby, who, by the way, he spends a lot of time with in the summers. They train together, and so does McKinnon, because I think they're all from Nova Scotia, or they all train in Nova Scotia, and so yeah, he's able to see himself on that stage, and hopefully he's still at this level 2 years from now, just about 2 years from now when the Olympics takes place in Italy, and he can be back on that Team Canada. And we talked about this 2 episodes ago, how unfortunate it's been that for several different reasons, international play for the NHLers hasn't been around for the last several years because of the pandemic, not going to 2 Olympics in a row. Hopefully he's still at this level 2 years from now, because he would have been able to make the last 2 teams for sure as well. So somebody I did, unless Brian, you have anything to add to this. So somebody that I noticed, and this just came to me, so bear with me, is back into a slump, is Jake DeBrusk. He has no points in his last 6 games, and I just kind of found myself noticing him just not having it. I don't know, over the last few games. And also I feel like Shattenkirk has kind of disappeared a little bit. I was just mentally taking note of some players that I thought maybe were struggling a bit, or even if struggling is not the right word, they just weren't contributing recently.
Yeah, I think it's it's fair to bring up, Bridget. I think that it's interesting that I'm not the one to bring up DeBrusk right now on the podcast. But it's yeah, I mean, look, it's is it a coincidence that a stretch where he's quiet, the team's struggling a bit? I just think that when DeBrusk is playing his best and he's producing, the team is also finding success. And I know that's unfair to put that on one player to be like, when he's not producing, they're not winning, but it does seem to be the case. Like when he's producing, your depth is on display. When he's not, it's not. I think another name to bring up, to be fair, because we've talked about him a lot this year, is Trent Frederick. We've given him a lot of praise this year, and he has 1 point in his last 5 games. And I could pull up the last 10 games in a minute to see what that is, but he's also run dry. And so, your depth scoring hasn't been where it was before the All-Star break, certainly in those 3-4 weeks leading up to the All-Star break. And I think special teams has gone a little bit dry here at times too. So you add that into some of the sloppiness from the team out of the All-Star break and the defensive lapses. It's been kind of a bit of a shitstorm, for lack of better words. Not so much against Tampa. It was better against Tampa, as you guys mentioned. But yeah, DeBrusk, he needs to produce more, and Frederick does too, especially when it matters most later on this season.
Yeah, it's like, certainly DeBrusk 0 points, Frederick 0 points since the All-Star break. Like, stands out. Morgan Geekie 1 point, Danton Heinen 1, and then that whole rotation of fourth line guys who sometimes get bumped up to the third line. Lauko, Boqvist, Steen, Anthony Richard, 0 points for all of them. Like, so at a time when you're hoping to see your secondary scoring, really kind of get to the level where it was. Look, they've had secondary scoring at times this year, but at a time where you really want to see that solidify leading up to the trade deadline, right now it's doing the opposite. Right now it's creating questions where, what was it like just around the trade? I mean, just around the All-Star break, I was saying I think defense might be emerging as a bigger area of need because I was actually feeling pretty good about the forward group at that time. And now all these guys are going quiet at once, and it's like, actually, it actually really does look like they could use another, call it middle six or third line scorer, someone to add a little extra punch there in the middle to lower part of the lineup. That still time. Again, I do think the Bruins can wait and see how things play out and wait out the market. I don't think they have to jump into anything unless there's a deal there that's too good to pass up. But this isn't really what you want to see leading up to the trade deadline. It's creating more questions and, kind of probably shifting Sweeney's attention to now maybe feeling like this is the area that he does have to upgrade.
Or at least an area that he does have to upgrade.
And the DeBrusk conversation, I only barely touched on him, but that's going to be an interesting one to have because, man, if he goes into another prolonged slump now, like if that's what we're seeing the start of, and 6 games without a point is already, too long of a slump for a guy who should be a top 6 forward. He's still not signed. He's still a pending free agent. Like, that conversation is going to come back. We all felt better about him when he got hot after Christmas, and it would be a really bad time for him to go cold again. Yeah,
I mean, it does change the deadline if you're thinking, okay, well, a combination of a few things. Okay, you're Don Sweeney and you're like, all right, conversations haven't heated up. Like, we're not close to a deal. We don't know if he's 100% wanting to extend with us. And he's also maybe not performing to top 6 standards. Then you might see a move for, DeBrusk and probably something else for a legitimate top 6 forward. That would be the situation where, and I think the only situation where you see like a big move made by the Bruins. I don't know about you guys, but I like the idea of adding Noah Hanifin, but I've kind of convinced myself that's not going to happen and that the Bruins just don't have the ability to do something like that this year. So when I think about what the trade deadline is going to look like, I think about adding someone like a Middleton, who we've talked about as like a bottom pair defenseman or a middle pair defenseman, and then like a fourth line guy, I think is what we're most likely going to see. But if they decide DeBrusk, we're trying to upgrade his position and we're worried that he's not going to sign, we're going to lose him for nothing, and see what value they could get out of him. That's where I see maybe the potential to add a flashier name.
Yeah, I mean, the longer this season goes, the more I don't think they need a Hanifin, because I think they have enough high-end talent on the blue line. And especially if you were to bring up Lohrei again, and I know he's still a work in process, but but he has that high end ability, especially in transition. And believe me, Noah Hannafin would be a phenomenal add to the blue line. But Noah Hannafin is not solving the toughness and the hard-nosed, tough to play against, tough to get ice around the front of your net and in the corners role that a third line D-man would do, that, which is what they need, Bridget. To your point, Jacob Middleton. Here's the other problem. There's probably a lot of contenders that are going to circle Jacob Middleton's name in Minnesota. So it's not even a guarantee the Bruins get him. They're going to have to outbid other contenders for him, most likely. What can the Bruins offer Minnesota that other teams can't? I honestly don't know. So that's not going to be an easy feat for them. But I do agree with you. On the blue line, that's where you need the help, because Hannafin doesn't solve the need of the third D pair, which is what I believe they need on the back end. And he certainly doesn't fix their middle six, bottom six issues at forward.
No, you don't think they could plug him in at forward?
Well, maybe
throw him in there on the third line.
I bet you he would score more than some of the guys they have out there. But yeah, I mean, look, it's a tale as old as time with DeBrusk and the inconsistent scoring. There's no other way to put it. I've said this in the past, and all the Jake DeBrusk defenders, I understand why you defend him, and I'm not here to rain on your parade. All I'm saying is, and I think we can all agree with this, if the Bruins want to get to where they want to go to, he has to produce at a decent to high level. And that's just the reality of the situation, because, you know, he helps them win in other ways. Okay, well, 7-game playoff series, he's going to have to score to really help them. And then he's not alone. Scott, you mentioned it. Frederick and Geeky and others in the middle six have not carried their weight. I don't know about you guys. No disrespect to Oscar Steen. I don't need to see him in a Bruins jersey ever again. That might sound harsh. What does he do? Honestly, what does he do? Seriously. And meanwhile, you guys put out a poll on the Skate podcast.
I was just going to bring this up.
There are players in Providence, and you might say a Lysell or a Merkulov is not a fourth line fit. Fine. But some of our commenters mentioned other names that could fit those mold if they call somebody from Providence. So Bridget, if you want to read off the Twitter poll and what the results may have been, and I don't mean to bombard you there, but there's options internally, and you better figure it out before the deadline, because like I said last week, you have to know what your options are internally before you go external.
Yeah, and that's our main point, is not that any of these guys should be on the Bruins during the playoffs, but like, it's to evaluate to see if they could help you if you needed them to, whether that be because you're down a man, or you're, whatever you might need them to do. You should get a look at them before the trade deadline. And so the poll that we put out said, which Bruins player would you most like to see called up for a chance before the trade deadline? And I listed the options as Lysell, Merkulov, Beecher, and other. Leave a comment. We did get quite a few comments, but the top answer was Fabian Lysell with 50%. And that one's interesting, because when we talk about Richard not being an answer on the third line, and not, maybe Lysell could fit in on the third line. Like we talked about, he's not a fourth line guy, but they have a hole on the third line right now that's not filled currently, and they're still looking for options there. So I like that as an option for the third line. Merkulov only got 16%, Beecher got 31%, and then other had 2%, and then they filled in some of the other names, and I'll read them for you. So the first comment was Trevor Kuntar, which is interesting because he's someone we don't talk about a lot, but his game has been picking up in Providence, and he can be a physical, hard-nosed player at times.
Yeah, I like the way Trevor Kuntar plays. I don't think he's NHL ready yet. 13 points in 47 games in the AHL, like that's, again, even in a fourth line role, you do need some offense. Like that's part of the problem we're talking about, is none of these fourth liners are putting up any points for the Bruins. That's part of the reason why Johnny Beecher got sent down. He was doing some things well. There was no offense that he was bringing to the table. So
he is an agitator, though, which is something that I feel like some of the other fourth line guys aren't doing at all.
I feel like, okay, if like what you just mentioned with Steen, like, is he not an upgrade over Steen? Like, is that not?
I mean, he might be. guess we really have no idea, and obviously because we just haven't seen Kuntar at this level.
I meant Beecher. Like, why?
Oh,
Like,
Beecher.
yeah, at this point, like,
Yeah,
I understand.
If the playoffs are starting today, I would rather have Beecher on the team than Steen. I also understand why Beecher got sent down because he is a younger player and there was still developing he needed to do. I would like for Beecher to be ready to get called back up sometime soon. I guess that's going to come down to the Bruins' own evaluations of what he's doing in Providence and whether he's taken the strides that they wanted to see him take. But yeah, Beecher could certainly end up as the help on the fourth line. I still think you need a little more pop. Look, you either do one of two things. Either you move Danton Heinen up to the third line, and I think that solves that issue. And then you try to figure out the fourth line, and maybe you go get that veteran who helps bring some identity to it. Or if you like the idea of Danton Heinen on the fourth line, because he can give that line some pop, which I think clearly Jim Montgomery does like that idea because he's trying everyone else and their mother on the third line and keeping Heinen on the fourth. Then you do have to try to find that guy who can fit on the third line. And that's where I would like to see Fabian Lysell get a look. I don't know if he's ready. I don't know if he's gonna be able to run with that job. He's, he got hot in Providence and then he just had a scoreless weekend. Before that, he had 8 points in 5 games. So it's still a little bit up and down with him. But yeah, I mean, it's as good of an option as anything else that they have, I think. I still feel like it might have to come externally, but before you get there, to me, yeah, you might as well give Fabian Lysell a look. Like I like Anthony Richard's hustle. Kid tries hard, but he's not sticking on a third line in the NHL. At least I don't think so. I'd be pretty shocked. So you might as well see what else you have.
Yeah, and then some names I wasn't expecting to get. So I'll read this, and this name came up twice. Brazeau. That was two different people said they want to see Brazeau. He's big, and they need the size.
Yeah, and his offensive game has taken a little bit of a step this year. 36 points in 48 games. He's been on line with Georgi Merkulov a lot. The complication there is you would actually have to sign him to an NHL contract. He is on an AHL only deal right now, and you are limited like how many NHL contracts you can have people signed to. So the Bruins might have to figure something out there, or decide if that's worth that chance and worth making that move to sign him.
And then we had 2 write-ins for Brandon Bussi. They want to see what Brandon Bussi can do in net, give him a chance in net before the trade deadline. So we weren't really talking about goaltending because that's a position that the Bruins do not lack in.
Yeah, what are we doing? Why are we doing that?
But I understand, like, when people saw Brandon Bussi play in the preseason, he was entertaining, and just like with us, we sometimes just want to see what the prospect looks like. If we're curious, we just want to see who do we got here coming up. So I understand the temptation to want to see Bussi, but I think that if you see Brandon Bussi at any point the rest of the season, you're in a bad situation because that means somebody got hurt. And that would not bode well for your playoff chances. So, thoughts on the Brendan Bussi call up idea?
I mean, how would that even work if the goaltenders are both healthy and on the roster? How is it even? Can you even do that? Can you even carry through goalies?
I mean, technically you could, but yeah, it doesn't make any sense. The Bruins have had chances to take a look at Brandon Bussi this year.
Yeah, they haven't.
Like,
when Ullmark
missed a few games, Swayman missed a couple early in the season, and they've made it abundantly clear that they don't plan on playing Brandon Bussi this year.
No disrespect to those commenters, and personally, it's not high on my priority list of call ups. I mean, Yeah, I think like what's the Bruins' plan? What's their plan here? Like, are they just gonna roll out Oscar Steen and Lauko and Maurice Rocket Richard there? Like what's going on here? Are they just gonna roll the dice with these guys and then maybe see at the deadline if somebody drops them? Like, why is it that they're so reluctant to give their higher end prospects NHL time? Nobody's trust me when I say calling up Lysell for a couple of games and him maybe not being ready is not going to hurt his confidence. It's not going to hurt his development. Like, just bring him up for a couple of games. See if he can spark you. Maybe he's, and again, it's on the player to be a professional. Maybe he's bored in Providence. Scott, to your point, maybe he's seen everybody around him that seems to be his peer or lesser than getting call-up opportunities. And it's like, maybe he's just over it. Maybe he's like, I want to get a chance to go. Like, and I know that's not going to get you called up, but it's like, that's the reality of human psychology. Maybe he's just like, what else? Like, I don't know. I'm 21 years old. I'm your top prospect, and I'm sitting here, going to Dave and Buster's on Wednesdays and having Providence games on Fridays. Like, he's probably just bored. And again, that's probably
I don't know. There's nothing about David Buster's that's boring, Brian. So
well, that's the most exciting part of his trip in Providence, probably, is the Dave and Buster's. But again, if not for, again, this is not even so much for Lysell, like, for the Boston Bruins organization. Like, see what you have in this asset. You drafted him in the first round 2 years ago or 3 years ago at this point, whatever it's been, and he has produced, and maybe other teams want to, like, if maybe he's a part of a trade package at some point down. Like, nobody knows what this kid can do at the NHL level. And that includes the team that drafted him. And again, it would be one thing if it was a repeat of last year where your team is like just filthy and there's no room for him. There's room for him. Is Anthony Richard, is he a finished product? Is he ready for this NHL opportunity? No. He's been an AHL journeyman for a reason. It's no disrespect, but it's like, nobody that you're calling up from Providence is a finished product because that's why they're in Providence. Like, you have to Bridget's point that she made months ago, and I echoed her sentiment. Like, there comes a point in time where your development can't grow until you get to that next level. And that's just how I feel about it. And somebody give me a good reason why Lysell is not getting an opportunity to be called up right now before the deadline, and the team's not playing great, and they have holes in the middle and bottom six. It's like it perfectly aligns for a call up. What's the problem?
yeah, and that's why we've talked about it. Like, I don't know, in each of the last several episodes, it's come up because ever since they had that dud out of the All-Star break, and then they had another dud not last game, but 2 games ago. It was like, okay, well, something's not working, and maybe it makes us go to who do we call up, or who do we add at the deadline? So, Scott, did you have any other thoughts? Our last comment said all of the above. Merkulov, Lysell, and Beecher.
I mean, Scott, before you go here, like, I'm going to throw it to you. Like, they say the hardest part of playing in the NHL is not getting there; it's staying there. Why are the Bruins making it so hard for him to even get there? Because that's all we're saying. We're just saying let him get a chance, and it's up to him what he makes of that opportunity. If he sucks and they send it back down, good. He sucked, but he needs an opportunity, right?
Yeah, I mean, I do think there's definitely an element of, like, you need to earn it too. And I think when you go back to some of the critical comments Ryan Mougenel was making early this year, and then stuff that we could see, like the very next game after that, he did the same thing, trying to go 1-on-4. Like, yeah, Fabian Lysell had to buy in and earn that, but by all accounts, he has turned the page at least somewhat and has made improvements, and his play and production has picked up. I don't know if, like, I guess it depends on your standard whether or not he's quote unquote earned a promotion. Like, I thought Georgi Merkulov clearly earned it, right? When he got called up, like, that was a guy who was dominating the league. Like, he was, for about a month stretch there, the best player in the AHL. I don't think Fabian Lysell's done that. But the Bruins are also in a position where, like, they have openings that I don't know that guys necessarily need to quote unquote earn. Like, I don't think they need someone to be the best player in the AHL for a month and before they give him a shot. Like as we've said, there's just there's openings here. There's guys on your roster who aren't running with jobs, who aren't earning their keep as everyday players. So yeah, and you might as well give him a shot. Like it's almost like Montgomery is like, I don't think this is what Montgomery is doing, but when you see like him keeping Hyde on the fourth line, it's almost like a message to Don Sweeney of like, hey Don, wouldn't this be a really nice spot in the lineup for a third liner? Like, isn't this kind of a hole? And like you try Anthony Richard there, okay, gave him 10 minutes. That's not nothing. He had 0 shot attempts, 2 hits. Okay, that's fine. That's a little bit of energy, but like that line got caved in. They didn't really create any chances. And again, that's not all Anthony Richard's fault. I thought Morgan Geekie had a tough game, but yeah, try something like. And if you send Anthony Richard back down, or you put Oscar Steen through waivers, like, so be it. I don't think either one of those guys has like any right to be upset that they're not getting like a longer lug. I mean, Oscar Steen's been here all year, so
10 points. There's 10 points collectively all year between Lauko, Steen, and Boquist. 10 points. 90 combined games played. If you want to add in Richard, it's still 10 points in 92 games. But I'm not going to – he's had 2 games. But the other 3 guys I mentioned because those 3 guys have had significant opportunities. 10 points in 90 games played. Like, Scott, to your point, like, yes, Georgi Merkulov was the best player in the AHL for about a month. I just want to clarify, and I know you weren't saying this, but being the best player in the AHL for a stretch of time is not the prereq to getting an NHL call up. Like, and that was just like one example where it was clear, but that's not what's required of all AHL call ups. And to your point, like those numbers I just said, those guys, what have they done to earn their spot? What have they done? Certainly offensively, nothing. Is Steen and Boquist, are they out there like finishing every single actually Oscar Steen might have decent statistics as far as checking goes. I don't hate Steen. He tries, and Boquist, they try, but they don't affect the game nearly enough outside of the score sheet to maintain their spots. And that's just the reality. I don't dislike them. I'm not saying they're not trying, but maybe they're just not good enough. Maybe Oscar Steen and his smaller stature, maybe his Energizer Bunny style of play, it just doesn't translate at the NHL level. He's too small. He's not effective enough. And Boquist looks more like a ballerina out there more times than he does a hockey player with his very, very smooth, elegant skating. But what is he doing outside of that? Not much. So it's a combination of all these things. Like some of these guys in Providence, like, yeah, they might not be the best player in the AHL right now, but they're helping their team win. They're producing. There's opportunities to be had in the NHL level. To me, it's an absolute blunder. It's an absolute mismanagement of your assets if they approach this deadline, which, as you said last week, Scott, is very, very closely approaching. It's less than a month away, I believe. And you're just going to not see what you have in the system because why? Because Oscar Steen is here and because Lauko and Boquist. And I'm so sick and tired of hearing like, oh, there's different cap implications to it. Figure it out. I don't know. Figure it out. Get rid of a guy. Like, buy him out. I don't care. But, like, they got to do something because it's too stale.
I mean, cap-wise, all they have to do is put Matt Potcher on long-term IR, which I'm sure they will at some point. They haven't yet because they haven't had to. But, like, there's an easy move to clear the cap space to call one of those guys up because they're all under $1 million. So, like, that wouldn't be an issue.
Yeah. I mean, there was a stretch of time about a month ago, again, right before the All-Star break. I kind of like that look of Boquist and Heinen, I think it was, and maybe Potcher. Like it was a different look, but since then, Boquist has done literally nothing. Poitras is out for the season, and Heinen, he's just it depends where they want to use him. Yeah, it's there's no reason why personnel decisions aren't being made right now. It's complacent, and it's quite frankly, it's annoying because as fans, I don't know why our desire to see what they have in the system is greater than the team's desire. It makes no sense to me.
Yeah, I'll at least give Boqvist this. Like, he's at least been a plus player at 5-on-5. He's a +6 at 5-on-5 and positive expected goals, positive shot differential. Lauko and Steen have been here all year. They're both a -2. Badly outshot when they're on the ice. Bad expected goal percentage. And it's not like they're a fourth line that's getting tough matchups, like handling opponents' top 6 or something, playing like a shutdown role. They're for the most part, they're getting other bottom 6 matchups, and the Bruins have still ended up, like more often than not, probably just breaking even, and on the whole, slightly in the negative for the season.
Yeah, I just don't. Yeah, sorry, Bridget, go ahead.
I was gonna say, I to talk about like not the call up part of this, but the actual like lineup shakeup that they did do to move Van Riemsdyk with Geeky and Richard. Like, there was nothing going with that line last game, and Scott noted. I mean, I sit next to Scott at all the games, and he leaned over and he was like, "This is a rough game for Morgan Geeky, like one of his worst." And I've not thought that Geeky has had a bad season since coming to Boston, but he just like couldn't handle pucks, and I don't know, it kind of seemed like a mental thing. Like, I'm not sure where it would have come from, but and then you have to elevate Frederick to the second line in that situation, off of the third line, which we mentioned. Frederick has been earlier in the season before the All-Star break had been playing like he could be a top 6 guy, but hasn't been. And I think it's because, all right, think about who he's with on the second line last game. It's him, Saka, and DeBrusk. And they seem to all kind of be down at the same time and not able to have one of them lift the other ones up.
So, do you guys do you guys think that line played poorly? Because I actually thought they created quite a few chances, and just like running through, Frederick had 4 shots on goal. Zaka had 8 shot attempts. DeBrusk had 7 shot attempts. Like, I actually thought they had some chances. Maybe they didn't do, enough to bear down and bury them. But I didn't hate that line, honestly. Like, I don't know if it lasts long term as your second line. And yes, Jake DeBrusk has to start scoring, and so does Frederick. Those guys are at points in their careers where, okay, you can do the right things, but ultimately, like, the Bruins need you to score. So I get that aspect of it, but like, I actually did think they played pretty well against Tampa. And I guess on my list of complaints from that game, like, just in this one game, that line would be pretty low on the list for me.
Yeah. The problem is, like, when I think back on like the better chances of the game, and I think did anyone on that line have them not come on the power play, like 5-on-5? I feel like Trent Frederick is the only one that really had a decent scoring chance of those 3, from my recollection. And I wouldn't say I hated it, but I just don't think it's not the solution, right? Like, that's not, I don't think that's.
I think in theory it could be a good line, right? If those guys are all playing to their potential, which is a big if with these players in particular, because they're all very streaky. I mean, Frederick's been good, I think, for the most part all year, and Zaka has been too. But let me ask you guys this. Has Zaka, from a production standpoint, been getting kind of a free pass from us here at the Skate Pod so far? Maybe not so much earlier in the year, but it does seem as the games go on, being 6th on the team in scoring, 33 points in 49 games. Obviously, it's definitely good, but considering the role that they're asking him to play, and that Charlie Coyle's got 12 points more than him. I just, I want to be consistent player to player. Like I talk about Jake DeBrusk a lot because not in recent weeks. I haven't probably harped on him in probably a month and a half, but he's somebody who we have high expectations for because he is capable of scoring at a good clip at the NHL level. And when he doesn't, it needs to be talked about. Pavel Zacha, to me, falls in that category too. I think for the most part, his points per game has been good this year, but I do think it's been dropping off in recent weeks, and it's starting to become noticeable now. Where Jake DeBrusk has 25 points in 51 games, and Zacha has 33 and 49. What do you guys think about Zacha's production? I think it needs to be better. I'm looking around at the Atlantic Division. This is something I wanted to talk about as we got later into the podcast, but right now in the NHL, there's 5 teams from the Atlantic Division that all, if the playoffs started today, would be in a playoff series. The Bruins are atop that list. All right. So, in the standings, the Bruins are the quote unquote best team of the bunch. As we all know, that doesn't really mean shit. But you have Florida, Tampa in a division right behind Boston. And then you have Toronto and Detroit. And I'll be honest with you, any one of those teams could beat Boston in a playoff series. And they would beat Boston in a playoff series if players like DeBrusk and Zacha don't score, along with the other big guys. Roundabout way of me asking you guys, Zacha getting a pass, and obviously those two guys need to get going.
Yeah, I mean, I would note on Zacha, like, he did just have a 4-game point streak wrapped around the All-Star break, 6 points in 4 games. Now, some of that came that he was reunited with Pastrnak for part of that stretch, so that certainly helps. If Pasternak's going to be loaded up on the top line with Coyle and Marchand, then Zacha still needs to produce in a second line role, and that's where, if DeBrusk is on one wing and whether it's Frederick or Van Riemsdyk on the other, like, you also expect those guys to help drive that line. So it could be more. Like, I think Zacha had gone quiet offensively for a little bit before that, but I'm not going to completely turn after 2 games without a point now, given that he did just have a point streak and did seem to be turning a corner in terms of production. And I just went through my notes on those guys just because sometimes I forget specific plays too. But in terms of quality scoring chances, I have Trent Frederick, two chances from the slot. This is all 5-on-5. One of those came off a steal by DeBrusk. DeBrusk and Zacha both had tips right at the net front that Vasilevsky just out of sheer reaction or luck made a save on. So those to me are quality chances. Zacha set up McAvoy for a one-timer from the slot that Vasilevsky saved. So there were some real quality chances there, in addition to just the shot totals. So I kind of come back to, like, one of those goes in, and we're talking about a different game. We're talking about how they scored one of the goals in a 3-2 comeback win. And I get it, they didn't go in, so that didn't happen. But I think if you create chances like that, most games that you're not facing Andrei Vasilevsky, at least one of those is going in.
Want to know what I think adds to what Brian was saying about Zacha, though? And this relates to your opening shift, Scott, and I think we should talk about this now. On the power play, I think that he is someone that hasn't been effective, and the power play in general has been down. But Zacha usually centering that top unit, and I've talked to you during the games, Scott, about how I like Charlie Coyle better in that role, and he only got 1 look on their 6 power plays with that top unit. It was Zacha out there the rest of the time, with getting a majority of the time with the better players on the Bruins power play. And I think that when he has the space and the ability to be on the man advantage, he's not taking advantage of it. You'd like to see him get more power play points and be more involved. And I really think that Coyle brings more to the top power play unit. I know, Scott, you had looked into the stats of it, but that was a few games ago, so obviously it's changed. But I think that there's pros and cons to having both of those guys in on the top unit, but I personally think Coyle could help with some of the issues they've been having on the power play.
Yeah, I agree. Scott, do you have a follow-up on that?
I think the realistic answer is neither one of them is really an elite power play bumper guy like Bergeron was for so many years. So you're trying to figure out who fits best, and they've gone back and forth. I think there are things that each of them brings that maybe the other doesn't. Like when Coyle's there, it opens up that play from where Van Riemsdyk gets it on the doorstep, where he's usually on the right side because he's a left-handed shot, so he's holding the puck out away from the goalie. That one-timer out to the bumper is now an option because Coyle's a right shot. With Zacha, that's not an option. So that's an upside that Coyle brings, and I think he's done a better job this year of finishing some of those chances from in close. What I think
Coyle also goes to the net a little bit more strongly and more often than Zacha does to crash on like rebounds. And also, this is important. Possession during the power play obviously leads to more chances, and he is really great with possession. He doesn't turn the puck over a whole lot. He wins battles on the boards. Like he's a guy it's really hard to take the puck away from and to force him to turn it over in any capacity. So I think that's also a big asset that he brings to the power play.
Yeah, I think the things that Zacha does better, just to provide the counterbalance, is that I think he moves around that bumper spot better and gets open and gives his teammates more options to pass into him and then quickly move it back out somewhere. Like when that unit is clicking, I feel like I notice Zacha's movement being a pretty key part of it. But he's probably not as much of, or at least hasn't been with the way that their power play operates, as much of a direct scoring threat as I think Coyle can be.
Can I ask you guys a question? This is non-power play related, but it's it all kind of is intertwined. But how would you describe the Bruins offensively? Would you describe them as a one-line team, a two-line team, a four-line? Because we talked about extensively for about 15 minutes how there's a lack of scoring, certainly with guys in the bottom six like Lauko and Steen. I mean, literally offensively anemic. Boquist. You do have some production from some third line guys, primarily in third line roles this year with Geeky and Heinen and Frederick that you can live with. But I'm reluctant to call them like a top heavy two line team because, like we just talked about, Zacha and DeBrusk, and some of this does get produced on the power play, right? As you guys were talking, but Zacha and DeBrusk, like I don't look at this Bruins team and be like, oh yeah, they got their top six is good. It's just the bottom six is kind of floundering a little bit offensively. Like I don't think the Bruins bottom six, specifically that fourth line, but even the third line at times, they don't score enough for the Bruins second line to coincidentally not score as well. Like the first line, those top three guys, Pastrnak, Marchand, Coyle. Pastrnak's obvious. Coyle and Marchand, they've carried their weight and then some in the scoring department. JVR is doing well too, but yeah, I just feel like that second line, they don't have the luxury of depth like last year's Bruins team to take not just nights off, weeks off. Scott, I know you mentioned Zacha had a 4-game point streak in there, but again, this is kind of why DeBrusk's name is so polarizing, and Zacha too. Like you can't have a top six and not have half of them scoring consistently enough. It does make me worry. It does make me worry long-term in the playoffs against these teams that do boast legitimate top six depth scoring and also scoring up and down their lineup too. The Bruins bottom six does not score enough for these other top six players in DeBrusk and Zacha to not be producing at a higher clip. I do think the power play is a part of this. DeBrusk has not been a integral part of the power play obviously this year, so maybe that's hurting him too. But how do you guys describe this Bruins forward grouping? I know in the standings and in the statistics, I think they're probably a top 10 team offensively in the league wide. But I don't know. That's why this team's difficult to judge sometimes, because the analytics do say that they are these things, but it just appears like it's like pulling teeth to get to that.
Yeah, I was gonna say, as a counterbalance, like not even just the analytics, but just pure goals scored. Like, this is a top 10 offense on the season, and they're still number 2 in scoring since Christmas. Um, I think it's easy to lose sight of that when it's gone, a little quiet over the last week. Um, I would say the analytics would actually back up the case that they might be overperforming a little, because their expected goals, their scoring chances aren't as high. So yeah, I guess I would describe them as a team with, I would say, 2 elite offensive players in Pasternak and Marchand. Obviously not quite to that level, but still very high end, and a solid top 6, at times a solid third line. Like, they've had depth at times, and that's why I don't want to like totally freak out about all these guys going quiet at once. I get it's a bad time for it to happen, but we've also seen stretches this year where they've had 3 lines rolling. I'm not sure they've ever really had all 4 going, maybe for a couple games here and there, but there've definitely been stretches where they've had 3 good lines going. And that's with the, I guess you could throw Padre in and say he was there and was certainly part of it. But essentially with the same personnel they have now. So, but yeah, they have to work. They have to work for their goals. Like, it's not going to be like last year where there's just enough talent that they can just simply make better plays than the other team and score off the rush. Like, they got to grind for their offense this year, at least in order to be a high end offensive team. And over the course of 82 games, it's hard to keep that up. And sometimes you're going to end up with a couple duds like they've had post All-Star break. And I'm not trying to excuse that. I'm just saying, like, that's the reality. When you have to work for your goals and it doesn't come easy like it did for them last year, there's going to be nights where guys just don't work for it for whatever reason, whether they're tired, mentally exhausted, whatever it is. So, yeah, like, I'll come back to, like, I think they could definitely use another third liner with some pop at the very least. If there's some sort of deal that makes sense for a top 6 guy, awesome. Like, count me in. I am very skeptical that deal is going to be out there, but yeah, I don't know. I guess that's kind of how I feel right now.
And just to give a quick answer to you, Brian, about your original question, nowhere near as often this year as last year have they been a full like 3-line or 4-line team. Like, last year's third line was a second line on most teams. Like, Taylor Hall was on that line, and that line scored. And it was never a question of, oh, can the third line do enough? Like, it was always a strength of them that they had those first 3 lines, and offense existed on all of them. Whereas when we're looking at the third line from last night, and it's JVR, Geeky, Richard, who I don't think I would have had any idea who it was if you told me in the offseason that was going to be a line combination for the Bruins here a month before the trade deadline. I would have been like, what? So definitely not the same third line that they had last year, because that included Charlie Coyle and Taylor Hall. So you see that the depth was much stronger last year, and we knew that coming into the season. It wasn't going to be that. It may never ever be that again. It was just such an amazing team they had on paper, and what they did last year. So but there's one last thing, because we're running out of time a little bit, that I wanted to talk about, and it was the way that the defense was involved in the offense yesterday. Charlie McAvoy scored a really nice point on a nice point shot. Carlo was firing shots. And Montgomery was asked after the game, was that a point of emphasis? And he said that's always a point of emphasis, but I think that we're going to start seeing more of that. So basically what they're doing is they're going low to high. And Montgomery said that is more effective than going D to D at the blue line. He'd rather see it come from like closer to the goal line, back up to the point. And that's really where you're seeing those opportunities come from. McAvoy and Carlo were the two I noticed most, but other defensemen too.
Yeah, they're definitely involved. I mean, McAvoy was involved right before his goal, getting the shot through, causing havoc down low for Tampa. Obviously, puck retrieval from I think it was Marchand and maybe Pastrnak helping him out was critical. So yeah, I mean, the problem that I see, and it's sometimes I feel like the Bruins, and it's not just the Bruins this year, it's the way the NHL is going. You want your defense to get involved, and I understand it, and I agree with it. But I don't know. I find that sometimes it enables inconsistency in positioning, because it's now up to the defenseman to know when to go, when not to go, and it takes communication with your D partner, and it's depending on game situation, what's the score, what period, what time, where you, is it a long change? All these things come into play. And yeah, like there's moments where you see it and it's like, oh, that helped jumpstart a good forechecking shift or a good scoring chance. And then there's other times where it just seems like it gets them out of position. And I don't know if it's a lack of focus. I mean, one of the other things, I know we've spent a lot of time talking about the offense, but and some of their struggles, but last night in particular, and certainly in this home stretch, like the team hasn't been very sharp mentally. I mean, giving up a lot of chances on the power play. I mean, Tampa had like 2 or 3 or 4 golden chances to score shorthanded yesterday. Like just, I don't know. I just feel like there's a lot of sloppiness and a lot of mental fatigue, or just I don't know what it is, and I'm not sure if this new age NHL of like just go play pond hockey at times just confuses matters when you're out there, because it's such a fast game. And I don't know. I know I'm kind of like all over the map here, but I think it's smart because it helps jumpstart your offense, but it just seems like it enables chaos at times if it's not done properly.
Well, and the Bruins clearly are like the defense gets involved when they have enough possession for them to do it. I think I said this before, but like they don't have the Cale Makar or Quinn Hughes who can really drive the offense from the back end. You know, McAvoy and Lindholm can do it a little bit at times, but they're not those guys offensively. Like when the Bruins are out possessing teams and like actually connecting in the offensive zone, that's when they can get their defensemen involved. And that's what you saw last night. It's why, you know, despite losing in the shootout, like overall, I'd be pretty encouraged. And Bridget, you said it in your opening shift. Like it was a good bounce back for them. 5-on-5, they out attempted the Lightning 55-36. High danger chances were 12-5 for the Bruins. They played well. The power play let them down. Allmark gave up a soft goal, and like that kind of ends up being the difference. You know, if that game was played all at 5-on-5, the Bruins probably win. So, one last point I was just going to make on the offensive depth thing, just because sometimes, you know, I think we're all guilty of it. Definitely fans are guilty of it. We get tunnel vision on the Bruins and we pick apart everything here. I would just point out, like, I think pretty much every contender is probably saying, I don't feel like we're deep enough offensively. Like, just looking at Tampa last night, Brendan Hagel on their second line has been great. Nick Paul, 29 points. Anthony Cirelli, 29. Like, that's, you know, that's basically in line with Trent Frederick, Jake DeBrusk type numbers. Like, so they're kind of getting the same thing. Tampa really doesn't have a third line either. Like, Mikey Asamont, 15 points. Tanner Jeannot, 12. Connor Sheary, 9. Like, these are guys who are playing on the third line.
Hey, no ragging on Connor Sheary, all right? That's a rule on this podcast.
Guys got 1 goal this year.
Okay, well, it's okay. You went to UMass. It's okay. You went to UMass.
I saw
that Frankie Vetrano is available potentially at the trade deadline. Anyone in on Frankie V?
So I would like Vetrano.
Yeah, the What Chaos crew. I think they're trying to trade for him.
I mean, so how many goals does Sheary have this year?
He has 1 goal in 36 games.
1. Oh, so but it sounds like it's one more than BU had in overtime on Monday night. And I'm sorry about that, Scott.
What the fuck? Come on.
Did you think we weren't going to get there?
I'm just kidding. But well, I'm not kidding. It's actually true. But no, it's a good point you raised, Scott. Certainly we are tunnel vision on this podcast. We're talking, 3 times a week on things Bruins. And look, obviously, objectively, the Bruins are having a great season. This is a year that was supposed to be, bubble playoffs at best, according to many, transition year, according to many, and they're all year have been atop the standings. Has it been pretty the entire way? No, but to your point, it hasn't been pretty for most teams. And I just think that, a lot of it's just creating talking points, obviously, for us 3 times a week and kind of picking at the bone when we don't really need to. It's just kind of like we kind of know, at least because we've watched this group for so long, and obviously it's changed over the years, but we watch this team, we kind of know, we know when they're clicking, when they're not. We know what their Achilles heels are and how they can play on their toes. And we just know that, like, straight up, like, if certain guys aren't producing in the playoffs, chances are this team isn't gonna get to where they want to go. And guess what? 31 teams don't end up doing that anyway. But you're right, though. This team, compared to the rest of the league, which is how we have to compare them, they are well off. They have their flaws personnel wise, but everybody does, to your point. So yeah, it's a good reminder, for sure. And yes, like weeks like this where they're struggling despite playing well last night in defeat, like it's easy to kind of harp on some of these shortcomings, but it's not the whole story.
I didn't really expect, like, I wasn't coming into this podcast expecting to be like the
optimist.
The optimist, the sunny side up, but sort of evolved that way. I don't know. Maybe I've only talked myself into feeling good, but like I think I feel better about the Bruins than I did an hour ago.
Yeah,
it's because it's Valentine's Day, Scott. Love is in the air, and he's just spreading the love. He's just reminding everybody why they should be grateful and thankful.
Well, again, not to harp on Monday night, Scott, but I mean, after BU let you down, the Bruins can only bring you joy at that point. I mean, hey, what happened there, Scott? What happened? I'll tell you what. I'll tell you one thing. The better uniform that night won. The better uniform won.
No, I strongly disagree. I actually don't like those Northeastern uniforms.
Better than those BU 2-star. Listen to me. BU.
Candy canes forever. No way.
Listen to me, Scott. We've talked about this in the past. Bridget, I don't know if you have that banner ready to go. Impromptu fashion segment. Thank you, Scott. You and I damn well know that the BU jerseys that they wear, both red and white, with the actual terrier on it that says Boston, is light years better than any of those multi-stripe jerseys they wear. In fact, the classic BU jersey, where it's like the Red Wings uniforms, but it says those ones too are better. Those candy cane jerseys that they wear are the worst of their arsenal. Not saying that they're bad, but compared to the rest of their wardrobe, it's by far the worst. I don't know what they're thinking, especially during the Bean Pot. If they had those terrier logos in the front, they would have beaten Northeastern on Monday. Mark my words.
So I actually agree with you. Like the candy canes would also be my least favorite of BU's arsenal, but they're still like a 93 out of 100. Like
you may be a little bit biased about that.
I may be, but I really like them all. And also that the candy canes were the ones they were wearing their last national championship in 2009. So they're never going away, I don't think.
Yeah, that's true. But yeah, I mean, but the traditional BU jerseys that they wore forever are 110 out of 100. And the BU jerseys with the actual terrier on the front are a 200 out of 100. And so now your 93 is not looking too sharp, is it? So that's all I have to say about that.
My opinion as to why they lost, and it does have to do with fashion, is because Scott didn't wear his lucky BU socks. So, and then after,
I'm Bridget. I was an unbiased media member. Okay.
Sure. He was just wearing the underwear, just so not the socks. But no, Connor Ryan, another BU grad that we work with at the Bruins that was there also. Once he found out Scott didn't wear those, said, it's all your fault. It's all your fault. So yeah, he doesn't want to take credit for it, but it was his fault.
Scott, what do you think of the? I mean, this is a rabbit hole we can go down. There's a lot of elite Hockey East uniforms over the years. I mean, I feel like some have changed and they're not as good as they used to be. Like UMass Lowell, their uniforms used to be replicas of the Montreal Canadiens, except obviously it said UMass Lowell. Those were absolutely elite. Northeastern's black jerseys with the Husky, and that Husky logo is filthy. BC's changed their uniforms more than I feel like, anything in the last like 10 years. I don't even know. Every year it's a different uniform. But do you guys, Bridget, UMass they've upgraded their uniforms over the years. I think UMass's uniforms, UMass Amherst, that is, their uniforms in the last 5 to 7 years are an upgrade over what they used to wear back in the day, I think, for sure.
Do you like the one with the giant M on the front? It's literally just a big M.
I don't like that because it just looks like Michigan or Minnesota, just a different color. Yeah, UMass has upgraded I know the old the big triangle that used to. I think people like that for nostalgia's sake, but that was not a good jersey. It pains me to say it. I firmly
Maine. Oh my God, Maine's uniforms are amazing.
You just remember Maine?
Yes. Oh my God.
I firmly believe BU and whatever iteration they choose to use are number 2 in Hockey East. Mm-hmm. I got to give it to Maine that they're number 1. They've been number 1 for a long time.
And they have not changed. Blues.
Yeah, they don't. They have a great thing and they haven't screwed it up. So
yeah, Maine's uniforms. How could I have forgotten those? I can't. I'm glad I remembered eventually, but what a sin. Yeah, Maine has some of the
and guess
best.
What? They're probably going to get showcased in the national tournament this year because Maine is doing really, really well. So they're top 4 or 5 at the poll at the beginning of this week. So maybe more people will get to see those.
I feel like the Big Four when we were growing up, and Scott, I know you're older, but no, not by much. But I think our generation, like the Big Four growing up, was like it was BU, BC, Maine, and UNH. Like those 4, I feel like were in national contention every single year. In like the early 2000s, like growing up, those are the top 4 Hockey East schools, and then UMass Lowell came on in like the 2010s. They had their days. UMass Amherst, obviously, Providence had some runs in a national title.
Yeah, Providence won.
Yeah.
But yeah. Providence, oddly enough, still hasn't won a Hockey East title under Nate Lehman. Like that's still the one thing missing from their resume.
And by the way, those jerseys I don't like. I don't like the creepy Friar. And we have talked about this before. And I see the creepy Friar all the time because I work at Providence. I'll be there again Friday. But that guy scares the hell out of me. And
I was gonna say, isn't the Friar your color commentator for this game?
Oh my God. I'm not even joking. I'm like mildly afraid of mascots. And that's probably because as a kid, I grew up going to PC basketball games and that guy was walking around and I was like, that guy is a murderer. Like that is a murderer. So yeah. And by the way, he interrupts my interviews with players in the intermissions. He will literally they've put him on skates for the hockey games and he knows that we interview them on the bench. So he'll come and skate right in front of them while I'm talking to them and just try to steal the spotlight. And he's got to go. And I know that that's people like
how the Bruins goalies do that during the Nesson interviews pregame.
Yeah, they just try to throw everybody off and try to get some airtime on TV. But I know people like the skating Friar because like they gave the Friar a little hockey stick on the uniform, but I mean. I'm sorry. Friar in general doesn't give you a lot of options to do something cool. It's like, yeah, here's this priest. He's our mascot.
Hockey East programs, if you're listening, that you need a uniform, a fashion upgrade, would be UVM, Merrimack, Providence, everybody else I feel like is in good shape if they use the right uniforms. And I think that, like I said, BU and BC have like 20 jerseys they can probably choose from. I don't know what the official uniforms are for either team anymore, but I think the best hockey uniform matchup in college hockey would be the BU with the terrier on the front, white jerseys, red helmets, versus Maine in their blues with the powder blue up top. Get me that for the Hockey East finals. Holy smokes. But no, BU's gonna wear the candy canes or their practice jerseys or whatever they're wearing these days, and it'll be a lackluster championship because of that. But anyway,
Maine will win because
Maine will win because the better
The-
uniform always wins, which is why the Bruins won't win the cup this year.
Well, the best part of that Hockey East championship matchup is that BC's not in it.
That's true. Which is also why Scott doesn't want Trevor Kuntar to get called up and doesn't want his cousin Mark McLaughlin to get called up because they're former Eagles. But
Yes.
I know we're at an hour 10. Did we gloss over the Marchand 1,000?
Well, so here's the thing.
Marshy.
Well, yes, but here's the thing. He's getting his real celebration on Monday. So this was his 1,000th game, but they're going to have a whole video tribute and everything before the game with his family. And we can definitely talk more about it then because we're going to probably hear from his former teammates. Bergeron, like you guys know, because you watched it, was there, but I'm guessing there's going to be even more people back for the actual celebration ceremony of it before the game against
Tyler Seguin will be there with the Dallas Stars.
I was gonna say it's against Dallas on Monday, so
play some party footage from 2011.
I think both of those guys probably hope that any footage from them those years probably got deleted at some point along the way. But yeah, we can talk more about that milestone in Marchand after we record Mondays.
Here's a random Marchand Bergeron question for you guys. So they've had their fair share of line mates on their wing. Hall of Famers, Mark Recchi, Yager, Seguin was obviously a good fit with them. Riley Smith was a really good fit with them. Obviously David Pastrnak and DeBrusk too, and others. But the obvious answer of who their best line mate is David Pastrnak. But is Mark Recchi like underrated because they want to sit in the cup as a line? Like, is that combination underrated?
Probably, but where it gets interesting is like that was legitimately like the second line on that team because you had Lucic, Krejci, Horton as the first line. So it's almost like a little different ask than in the later years where whatever line Marchand and Bergeron was on was your top line. So you're always looking for who's gonna play at the level to be a first liner. And, obviously there were a couple guys who rotated through before you finally settled on Pastrnak for many years. And then, when you split them up, you try, DeBrusk eventually settles there, but like, yeah, some Craig Smith at times.
Louis Eriksson.
Yeah.
Way back when.
But, and of course, like, look, it didn't end well, obviously, but that 2012-13 season, I know it was lockout term, but like most of that year, Marchand, Bergeron, Seguin was a really good line. And then things kind of get thrown off. Seguin goes quiet in the stretch. They try Yager there. That doesn't really work. Like things just never click, especially in the cup final. But that could have been a great line. Obviously, Seguin did eventually settle down and become, a really reliable, consistent player for the Stars for many years. But, who knows? Who knows if that could have happened here had they hung on to him?
I don't. My guess is no. But I watched. So there is actually some very old episodes of Behind the Bees of it, like on YouTube, and I happened to stumble upon like one of the very first episodes, and it is them making the decision to trade Seguin. And you can just tell by the tone and the what's being said. It's like it's not telling you a lot, but it's telling you like they're done with him. Like they're like trying to figure out the best way to who can we get.
Yeah, well, that first those like early episodes, it was, and I remember like they got ripped for this at the time because it was basically just like anti-Seguin PR. It was like, guys, we have to justify the trade, so like let's get this out there with us, bashing him, but like we're not going to go all in, but like we need people to know that we were done with him or whatever.
Yeah, and then they juxtapose it with them calling Horton and him saying he doesn't want to come back to the team. And actually, Louis Erickson was in one of those episodes. It might have been the same episode because it was like his first time coming to Boston. I don't know. There was a lot going on in those like first few episodes of Behind the Bee that I randomly stumbled upon. But
yeah,
now we've definitely gone very far away from what this podcast was.
Well, it's just funny because like that Seguin thing, the way they handled that, like the year between the cup appearances, so the year they lost to Washington when they were defending champions, like Seguin was the team's leading scorer that year with like 69 points or something like that, and was on that Marchand Bergeron line. So
nice.
So it's like it's interesting that they come back for the lockout shortened season. He's on that line, and then they get Yager, and yeah, like Seguin, who was like their top scorer for like that prior year and a half, just gets bounced to like the third line. And I know there was off ice reasons, but I mean he wasn't. Yeah, I mean they say if Seguin gave us half of Kane, we win the cup. Well, Seguin actually didn't play terrible in the cup finals since he was on a line with Paille and Kelly. Also, Seguin's trade was huge because of the return or like the lack thereof. Turns out the return was actually pretty good because Riley Smith turned out to have a pretty points per game wise, pretty comparable probably to Seguin, maybe a little bit less, but he has a Stanley Cup to his name. And obviously the Bruins got rid of Riley Smith, and that was
right. I was gonna say the real problem was they gave up on Riley Smith or thought he was expendable or whatever, couldn't fit his cap hit in. That trade came at a time where like they were having cap issues, but yeah, ultimately like that was a really bad trade. Him for Jimmy Hayes. Riley Smith clearly just a better player and had much better years after that.
Yeah. I mean, the 3 years immediately after the trade, Tyler Seguin was he was an elite forward in the league compared to the rest of the landscape at the time. But since then, Riley Smith has been the better player, I would say. I mean, huge part of Vegas's success in the last 5-6 years, top liner, depending on how you want to look at it, and cup winner. So yeah, that trade to Florida, not great, but
and it's interesting to tie this back to Marchand because I was also when I realized
Florida let him go for nothing. Florida let him go in the expansion draft, right?
I know. Him and Jonathan Marchand, though.
What is wrong with what's going on with these?
Who was wait, remind me, was he the MVP of the playoff run last year for Vegas? Weird.
But yeah, to swing this always back around to Marchand, because when I realized Seguin was going to be in the house Monday, and I'm sure like him and Marchand will meet up before or after the game or whatever. I found a newspaper article with Marchand at training camp after the Seguin trade, like his first comments on the trade, and he was basically like, it's a huge wake-up call, like Seguin's a really good player, had such a bright future here, and it just sort of hit me that you're gonna have like a bad half a season and they'll ship you out. And he was clearly kind of like shaken by it, and I think I wonder if like maybe part of him was like, whoa, could that have been me? Like if I slid down the stretch, would I be the one getting shipped out type thing? So it was interesting to go back and read some of that. And Marchand has, always defended Seguin. They've remained friends since then. I remember, I forget, it wasn't Jim Nill, but do you remember like the Stars executive who like ripped Seguin and Jamie Benn at one point? Because they were like two of the highest paid forwards and they were off to slow starts. And I think he like literally on the record said they're playing like horse shit. And and that was like a whole big thing. Like the NHLPA like released a statement on it and called on the Stars to apologize. And Marchand had strong comments in support of Seguin at that time too. But yeah, it's Seguin, by the way, not far from 1,000 himself.
Yeah.
He'll get there. What I think early next year.
Yeah, he's at 954.
That makes me feel old.
Well, yeah, because I was just looking it up because
what about Taylor Hall? He's had injury issues, so
Yeah, he's probably because of that. He's probably maybe around high 8s, maybe. But yeah, I just had that number pulled up because while we were talking about this, I was like, well, Marchand and Seguin had the same. They were rookies at the same time. Obviously, Marchand was a little bit older, but yeah, Seguin's at 954, so yeah, he should hit that mark probably maybe next November or something like that. But
Yeah,
if he's healthy,
Hall's 832, so he's got a few more years.
and
Yeah, that draft happened when I was in high school. And yeah, so that makes me feel old that Sagan's almost at 1,000 games. But it doesn't take much to make me feel old these days because I am. So
what's Marchand's point total right now? In his career, regular season wise?
9 something. Or
The reason I ask is because it took Marchand until like the 16 9-12. I feel like as long as Claude was the head coach, which was up until sometime in 2016 when they canned him, or early 2017, was Marchand ever a first power play guy under Claude? Like
only for like very small stretches, but
yeah, I mean,
never regularly, never for like a whole season.
Marchand probably. This might be. Again, there's nothing to back this up. I just feel like had Marchand been a power play guy for his first 6 seasons in the NHL, I feel like he could have been flirting with 1,000 points in 1,000 games, maybe, but that's total speculation. But I'm curious what he'd be at had he been a power play guy, because he was always one of the best forwards, regardless if he was a rookie or not. Like he was always one of their higher end forwards. So
yeah, even like that again, because I was just like looking up random different Marchand things. Like the 2011 Cup run, he led the team in 5-on-5 goals in that postseason. Like you almost just forget that because you're like, oh, like he broke through. He'd established himself by that point, and you remember him scoring some big goals in the Cup final. But it's like, no, he was literally their best 5-on-5 goal scorer that postseason, as his first full year as a pro.
Well, there you go. There's a little bit of Brad Marchand chatter before we signed off. We had to get to it a little bit.
We went on several tangents beforehand, but
yeah. Congrats to Brad Marchand on 1,000 games. Let's talk about Tyler Seguin for 8 minutes.
Yeah. And the
By the way,
New Jerseys.
Where else there will surely be some Marchand talk? Sunday skate this Sunday.
There you go.
Me, Bridget, Razor, 9 to 11 a.m.
Mm-hmm.
Season premiere.
That's right. Big stuff.
Big stuff. I will be listening. I will be listening. Hopefully, all of our listeners will be listening and calling in. Bridget, Scott, anything else? We've been going for a little bit long today. Unexpected. Didn't think this would be a long episode, but it ended up being one of our longer ones.
No, it did. I think I said right around 55 minutes. We got to start wrapping this up. So I want to say one last thing about Charlie McAvoy. And that has turned out to really that was like a half hour ago. All right. Well, you know what? I am hungry though. So that's how we end.
Well, yeah, I'm actually done now. So I'll go.
Okay. All right. Be lost. All right. I'm sorry, Scott. All right. So, signing off. Hope you guys all have a wonderful Valentine's Day. Eat some chocolates, and we will talk to you all on Friday. Hey guys, thanks for watching the Skate Podcast. If you want to see more of our videos, visit our playlist.
Not in front of a screen? You can listen to us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts.
Don't forget to follow us on social media. And if you enjoyed this video, please don't forget to give us a thumbs up, subscribe to our channel, and leave a comment.